What's the scariest thing that's ever happened to you, supernatural or not? Fell asleep in the living room watching TV. Wake up around midnight to my dad walking past me. He heads to the side door, unlocks it, and starts walking to the chicken coop. By the time he's outside, I'm up and following after him, calling out in a whisper, "Dad, what are you doing?" No response. I think maybe he can't hear me despite being only a few steps behind him. Dad walks into the chicken coop, and I lose sight of him for about 2 seconds. I walk into the chicken coop and it's empty. I'm very confused now. There is only one door for the coop, and I'm standing in it. Suddenly, there's a hand on my shoulder. Almost jump out of my skin and whirl around. It's my dad. He heard me walking outside, had followed after me trying to call out my name, but for some reason, I hadn't heard him. I was 13 and babysitting 2 7-year-old boys. One of the boys found his dad's gun. They proceeded to point it at me and threatened to shoot me, because they found it funny. I still don't know how I talked them into putting the gun away. I had been babysitting them for a year on Wednesdays. That was the last night I did though. Woke up around 3 a.m. one night to loud tapping outside my bedroom window. My bedroom was in the basement of our house. I assumed it was raccoons or something trying to get into our neighbor's shed. After listening for a while longer, I managed to fall back asleep. In the morning, I brought up the noise to my mom, who said she had heard a similar noise coming from that same side of the house, only she got out of bed and went to the front living room window to investigate. What she saw was a man emerge from between our house and our neighbor's place. He stopped in front of our home, took a long look before removing a pair of latex gloves and then proceeded to walk down our street. I assume he was testing for weak spots or something and luckily didn't manage to make it inside that night. After one of my cousins died, 10-year-old girl, in hospital from cancer, I was babysitting her little sister, 4 years old, as my parents and hers were at the hospital. The 4-year-old comes up to me and says the 10-year-old was in her room but left and said goodbye. A moment later, I got the call. She had died. My parents both work for a security company, and they tell me this all the time. My mom once worked, she worked there for 40 years, lots of different positions, as the person who would call people's houses if their alarm was going off for more than 30 seconds. This lady said she got home from work and noticed a few things out of place, not like her whole house was overturned or anything, but enough to freak her out, and she knew that the dispatch would come if the alarm was going off, so she decided to keep it going to call the police rather than turning it off and dialing 911. And thank God she did. The police came, she turned off the alarm, and they found 2 burglars with guns and a whole slew of her personal belongings hiding in a closet in the basement. Who knows what would have happened if she deactivated the alarm and never had the police show up? My family is all red-headed women, and my little sister was tiny and beyond adorable as a child. She also had hearing problems and speech delays, and probably ADHD, so she was always off in her own little world. One day, I was out with her and my mom, shopping at TJ Maxx or something. I was maybe 10 or so this was the early 90s, and she was 4 or so. After a while, my mom demanded, "Where's your sister?" We looked all around and nothing. This was before stores went into lockdown for lost kids. I don't remember this, but as my mom tells it, she then saw a woman walking out the front door of the store with my sister by the hand. My mom shouted, "Hey, lady. That's my kid." The woman never even looked down. Just dropped my sister's hand and kept walking out the door. The one I'll tell for this thread involves a night where I was driving up the coast of Central California toward Santa Cruz with my mother and sister. I think I was about 22, 23 at the time. It had already been a strange trip in some ways. At one point in the car, my mother had gotten angry about something, and I looked over at her and, for a brief moment, saw symbols in the air above her head. If you've ever seen Hyperbole and a Half-Simple Dog, it looked like that. No idea what that was about, but it startled me. So, we're driving along, nearly there, and as the sun goes down, it starts to look like rain. That ominously heavy blue evening sky. My mother hates driving in the rain, refuses to go any further. We pulled into some nondescript roadside Super 8 type motel that backed up to the highway and not much else. I remember it was somewhere south of Monterey. 4 stories of what looked like cinder block construction. Now, there is slightly more development in the area now, and with the advent of cell phones, it's not quite as isolated as it was back then. I, being a young 20-something, was dismayed at the prospect of spending a weekend night with my mother and sister in the middle of nowhere. I asked if I could take the car and drive up to see my friends in Santa Cruz for the night. Denied. With not much else to do, we all crashed out. Around 3 in the morning, I woke up. Now let me sketch for you how the room was laid out. 2 beds, with my mom and sister in the bed to the left, and me in the right, one closest to the door. Across from us was a TV, and kitty corner to where I was sleeping was the bathroom. Fluorescent orange from the sodium lights outside filtered in through the bathroom window, and every so often, a truck would go by, and the light would flicker. I noticed that my sister was awake, too. "What's got you up?" I asked her. She said something interesting. That she had dreamed the television had turned on and started talking to her. We had both developed an interest in the paranormal, the occult, and the just plain woo-woo around that age. We spent some time discussing her theory that perhaps it was one of her spirit guides communicating with her. As we were laying there in our respective beds, something near the bathroom grabbed my attention, and then held it. A dark, waist-high, humanoid-shaped figure. Not a cast shadow, but most definitely there. I blinked, I checked that I was awake. Yep. And it was still there. People react differently to their experiences of the paranormal. I love these kinds of Askreddit threads, and I recently found one where someone aptly summed up the same thought I had. Every paranormal experience will engender different feelings in you. In my case, I had been pretty terrified my whole life that I would see something like this. Now that I was actually looking at it, and I was decidedly awake, my first thought was actually surprise. I didn't feel threatened by whatever it was. I didn't necessarily feel safe, either. It's just that I've been around humans who instantly made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and I've spent time in the woods that made my neck prickle, too. This was neutral more than anything. But it was still there. My next thought was, if my sister sees that, she will never sleep again for the rest of her life. Now, on the defensive as the big sister, I made a move to get out of bed and turn on the lights. Not really sure what my plan was after that, but it was a start. Before I could reach them, there was a great crack and a flash in the middle of the room, just like when a light bulb breaks. There was no light there, of course. Strangely, after my heart rate went down, I went back to sleep easily enough. I've talked with my sister about it and, years later, admitted what I saw that night. We're both pretty biased about it. Our lives have taken us to some very strange places, so maybe that's why. Either way, I've had some other paranormal encounters over the years, and have enjoyed reading so many other people's accounts of their own spooky times. I guess I am more than anything, just grateful I've never seen red eyes staring at me from my own closet. And for the people who might be wondering, I've had sleep paralysis once, while coming off an antidepressant. It definitely wasn't that, and I was about as awake as could be. My best friend and I were walking through a park just after dark. We were about 16 at the time and a little nervous, because the area we come from is kind of rough. So, we're near the exit of the park, and I get a weird, hairs on the back of my neck, something is wrong feeling. I look behind us. Nothing. We walk on. I look behind my shoulder again, and there is a figure moving towards us. Humanoid shape, but I don't remember seeing legs. Pure white eyes. No features. I grab my friend, and we start to run. Jump the fence at the exit, cross the road and run along the street parallel to the park. We were moving as fast as we could. I glance to the right, and the thing hasn't left the park, but is keeping pace with us, but not running. Eyes fixed on me. Never been back. I'd been sleeping alone, in my own bed, in my mother's apartment, where nothing suspicious had ever happened before, except for maybe an occasional knife or fork disappearing without a trace. Something woke me up in the middle of the night, but in the alert, sudden sense, not the "oh, I'm done sleeping" one. I looked in the corner where the closed door was and saw 2 big black humanoid figures. They were definitely there, I was definitely awake, and those were certainly not shadows. I know every way the shadow might fall in that room. I freaked out as soon as I saw them, and rushed to reach the light on the bedside stand. When I clicked the switch, the bulb made a crackling sound typical to the little thread inside breaking, and the light went out a split second after I had turned it on. I felt like whatever was in the room with me wasn't pleased by what I was trying to do, and now I didn't have a way to chase away the darkness either. Without turning around to face the shadows, I've dug my face down into the pillow and forced myself to fall asleep as quickly as possible. It was abnormally fast, too. I usually struggle with sleep, and I was very scared then. In the morning, I thought it was just a dream and let my day go by as normal, only remembering what had happened later that day. When it was dark enough to turn the bedside lamp on again, I've discovered that the light bulb had burned out. No idea what any of that was to this day. Fell into a tree well while backcountry skiing 30 years ago. If a member of my group hadn't seen it happen and saved my ass, that would have been it for me. What happened to me was that I ended up dangling upside down. I fell near the tree and toppled in. It all happened pretty fast. I suspect the fall may have been caused by snow giving way beneath me, which might explain why I fell toward the tree rather than away from it. If that's what happened, then the tree will cause the fall itself, not just the predicament that followed. I needed to release my bindings to get out. I had enough core strength to get a hand on one, but no leverage to pop it open. There were no other branches within reach that I could use to climb my arms up, so that's how they would have found my body in the spring, presuming nothing else found me first. I was dangling high enough up that I was clear of the snow, but others aren't as lucky. If you auger headfirst into the snow and can't get free, you've got a bit of time, but then you suffocate. I was a New Englander skiing in conditions we don't get back east. Contrary to popular belief, we do get some powder days, but not as many and not with a 10-foot base. An experienced Westerner wouldn't have skied as close to the tree as I did. I was with a pack of locals who wanted to show me a good time skiing off the backside of a major ski area. Fortunately, our leader hung back and kept an eye on the rest of us. It took him a bit to get to me, but he found me and popped my bindings. We both laughed when I fell headfirst into the snow below, but it was a nervous laugh. We both knew my ass was grass if he hadn't been in the right place at the right time. If you Google tree well deaths, tree well safety or tree well escape, you can learn more about the risks, how to avoid them and how best to try to escape. There are also lots of sad stories about people who weren't as lucky as I. I'm a volunteer teacher at a Chinese university for traditional medicine. About a year ago, I was having dinner with a colleague and meeting his family for the first time. The restaurant we were eating at was actually located on campus, and finals had just finished, so the place was filled with would-be doctors, nurses, and other students studying health and medicine. My colleague's wife was kind and his son a bit hyperactive, but everything seemed to be going fine. Here's where things went wrong. I hadn't eaten that day, so I was exceptionally hungry, and I ate a little faster than I should have. Suddenly, a chunk of pork had lodged itself in the entrance of my windpipe, and I couldn't breathe. Okay, I thought, I just need to stay calm and get someone's attention so that they can perform the Heimlich maneuver on me. So, I put my hands around my neck, and I tried to show my colleague that I couldn't breathe, dry heaving all the while. I'll never forget the look of confusion on his face as he said, bewildered, "Is it too spicy?" Now I start to panic. I jumped up out of my chair, making some noise as several students turned to look at me, and all the while, I was giving the supposedly universal sign for choking and looking like I was about to puke but not making a sound out of my mouth. The students, with zero comprehension on their faces, turned back to their meals. My colleague is saying things to his wife like, "Get him a napkin, or some water. It's probably too hot for him." At this point, I am starting to realize that nobody in this whole restaurant knows what to do if someone is choking, or can even recognize it happening in front of them. I realize that I will die surrounded by fake doctors and medical students who are learning to give people herbs for their back pain and stick needles in your skin, but never learn first aid. I realize I will die in front of this man and his wife and son, who all have no idea what is happening and will soon see me pass out and turn blue, and still probably do jack shit to help me. I don't want to die. Well, at least not like this. Not surrounded by slack-jawed idiots wearing lab coats and playing doctor. Not choking on a piece of pork right after my semester ended, when it could have been avoided if just one person knew, "Oh, that guy is choking." At this point, it's been at least 30 seconds since I last took a breath, possibly longer, and the corners of my vision are starting to get blurry. I knelt down on the ground, and tried to block out all other distractions. I began to massage my throat. I thought that I could dislodge it myself. I couldn't rely on anyone else, after all, so I was pretty much out of options, although later I read up on how to perform the Heimlich using the edge of a chair. I didn't know that at the time. I swallow really hard. The food disappears, and I gasp for air. I lived, obviously, but I never came so close to death before or after. Later I learned that China generally doesn't really have food safety laws requiring posters to be up in kitchens with the Heimlich maneuver, nor is there much awareness of what choking is despite it killing millions every year. I have a lot less respect for traditional Chinese medicine now. I was in college when the same thing happened to me. I was sitting at my desk surrounded by books when the phone rang. It was my roommate's idiot boyfriend. I told him to hold on a minute. She was sleeping, but that I would wake her. I then took that opportunity to take one of the Skittles I had been eating and toss it in the air and attempt to catch it in my mouth. Usually, I am terrible at this skill. But on this occasion, I succeeded, perhaps too well. Because the wayward Skittle sailed through the air straight into my mouth, down my throat and became stuck there. I started to gasp and wheeze. I couldn't breathe or speak. My roommate quietly snoozed away on the bunk bed just a few feet away. In between my life flashing before my eyes, I could hear the inquiries of her boyfriend on the phone. Hello? Hello? Is anyone still there? I can hear someone, like coughing or something. Do you have asthma? Great. Between gasping for breaths, I think about how I will be remembered for having an idiot death, one that was perfectly preventable. I was killed by Candy, for God's sake, while my roommate slept just a few feet away. If only she learned the Heimlich maneuver, if only. Finally, I can take no more. I am mentally organizing my memorial in my mind, but decide instead to give it one last shot. I stand up, clench my fist, and thump myself in the chest. Nothing. I try again, and the skittle is dislodged. Hallelujah, I can breathe. Oh, joy. Oh, heavens. Oh, a wonderful blessing this thing called air is, really you must try it. So finally, I pick up the phone and nudge my sleeping roommate awake. Miraculously, she has slept through the whole ordeal. She takes the phone drowsily. She speaks to her boyfriend for a moment and then says, "My boyfriend is worried about your asthma. He says it sounds bad." Wait, I didn't know you had asthma. My family narrowly missed an armed carjacking. When I was about 10, a guy waved my family's car, wagon full, with my parents up front, me and my 2 siblings in the back, and dog in the way back, down about 2 blocks away from where we lived. My dad, being the nice guy he is, pulls over and the dude walks up to my mom's door. She rolls the window down, and the guy casually reaches in and opens the door and grabs my mom to pull her out. She screams go or something of the sort and my dad floors it. We blast out of there, and my mom shuts the door. In the rear window, the dude is jogging after us, holding a pistol. We sped past our house and drove around for almost 5 minutes before my parents decided that we had to go home. There was nothing else we could do. Pulling back into our driveway was the most scared I've ever been in my life. This is all pre-cell phone, or at least before everyone had one, by the way. My wife texted me to say she lost our 2-year-old in Tokyo. We are Canadians. A stranger brought him back. She turned her head away a few seconds to pick up something our son had dropped, and he had run into an elevator. When I was 4 or 5, I did something similar to your 2-year-old. My sister and I raced to the elevator of our hotel in Hong Kong while our parents were just leaving the hotel room. The elevator opened, and I pressed a bunch of buttons, and it suddenly closed on me. It then opened again, and I couldn't find my parents or my sister. The hotel floors all looked the same, which I didn't know at the time, as it was the first time I remember being in a hotel, or in an elevator for that matter. I started crying in the hallway, thinking I would never see my parents or sister again. These 2 housekeeping staff heard me and brought me into a room where they gave me cookies and milk to stop me from crying. They then proceeded to take me to the lobby, thinking that my parents would be there. They were, and as soon as I saw them, I ran as fast as I could and gave them a hug.